The Galactic Council was the oldest and most powerful governing body in the known universe. It was composed of species whose civilizations had lasted for tens of thousands, even millions of years. Their technological prowess was unmatched, their wisdom infinite, at least that's what they believed. Then humanity arrived. When the first human representatives stepped onto the council's grand hall, they were met with laughter. Not whispers, not polite chuckles, full, unrestrained laughter. The representatives of the more ancient races barely contained their amusement. Humans were a joke. Their civilization was a mere 3,000 years old at best. They had only been in space for a few centuries. They still had internal conflicts, they still struggled with disease, and they still had to use primitive cybernetics instead of organic evolution to enhance themselves. Compared to the empires that had ruled the stars for millennia, they were nothing more than children, barbarians playing at being a spacefaring race. The Darathi delegate, a tall, serpentine being with bioluminescent veins, slithered forward with a mocking smile. "And what does your fledgling species wish to contribute to the council? Farming techniques? Perhaps some primitive metallurgy?" The chamber filled with more laughter. The human ambassador, Michael Carter, simply smiled. He had known this was coming. Humanity had read the reports, seen the arrogance of the council races. They had been prepared for ridicule. What the council wasn't prepared for was the truth. Michael took a step forward, his voice calm but steady. "You mock us because of our age, because we are young." He let the words hang in the air, waiting for the laughter to die down. "And yet, despite our age, we are here, standing among you. Have you ever wondered why?" The laughter faded slightly. A few of the council members exchanged glances. "You believe time grants wisdom, that the longer a civilization exists, the stronger it becomes?" Michael's eyes scanned the crowd. "But tell me, how many of your ancient empires have fallen? How many species do you now call extinct because they grew complacent? How many civilizations stagnated and faded into irrelevance?" Silence. "We are young, yes, but in that youth, we have something none of you have anymore. Drive. When we reached our moon, we went further. When we mastered spaceflight, we pushed beyond our own system. We have barely been here for a cosmic blink, and yet we have already reached the stars." Michael leaned forward, his voice darkening. "And if we have done all this in just a few thousand years, imagine what we will become in 10,000. A murmur spread through the chamber. The amusement was gone. In its place, an uncomfortable realization. The council had laughed at them. But perhaps, just perhaps, they should have been afraid. The silence that followed Michael Carter's words was thick with tension. The Galactic Council, once filled with laughter and mockery, now shifted uncomfortably. The reality was beginning to set in. Humanity wasn't just another fledgling species. They were something else entirely. The Darathi delegate, who had led the initial mockery, narrowed his glowing yellow eyes. He leaned forward, his voice laced with condescension. "Impressive rhetoric, human, but words alone do not make a species powerful. Your people have no great fleets, no planet-cracking weapons, no ancient archives of wisdom." Michael smirked. "Oh? Is that what you think?" He tapped on his wrist communicator. In an instant, a holographic display filled the council chamber. It was a star map, one that showed an alarming detail, hundreds of human colonies. The council gasped. They had expected a dozen, maybe 20 at most. But hundreds? That was impossible. The growth was too fast. Even for an expansionist race, the resources required to establish so many settlements in such a short time should have been beyond their reach. The Ralzek ambassador, a towering insectoid with razor-sharp mandibles, clicked his jaws in agitation. This cannot be correct. Your species was barely crawling out of your own system a few centuries ago. Michael nodded. Yes. And now we are here. The hologram changed again, this time displaying the battle records of humanity, not against alien foes, but against themselves. Wars that had shaped their resilience, conflicts that had pushed them to adapt, to innovate, to survive. The Great Wars, the nuclear age, the rise of artificial intelligence, the era of global conflicts and space militarization. Each one had been brutal, but each one had made humanity stronger. Your civilizations reached an age of peace so long ago that you forgot what struggle means, Michael said, his tone sharp. But we have never known peace for long. Every generation has fought for something, and that fight has forged us into something you can't comprehend. The Zalari delegate, a creature of pure energy encased in a floating crystalline shell, hummed in thought. You claim strength through suffering, but suffering often leads to destruction. How do we know your species will not burn out like so many before it? Michael's smile didn't waver. Instead, he pulled up one final piece of evidence. A simple image. It was Earth, but not just any Earth. It was Earth after the cataclysms, after nuclear disasters, asteroid impacts, climate crises, and countless self-inflicted wounds. And yet, it was still there, thriving, alive. Because no matter how much we suffer, we endure. Silence fell once again. But this time, it was different. This time, it wasn't because they were dismissing humanity. It was because, for the first time, they were beginning to understand. And they were afraid. The weight of realization settled over the chamber like a suffocating fog. The ancient races of the Galactic Council, beings who had ruled for millennia, who had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, now found themselves staring at something they had never encountered before. A species that should have been fragile. A civilization that should have been insignificant. Yet here they stood, unbroken. The Darathi delegate's tail flicked in agitation. His confidence was shaken, but his pride would not allow him to admit it. Endurance alone does not make one superior human, he sneered. You speak of survival as if it is a virtue. But tell me, what have you contributed to the universe? What wonders have you created that compare to the knowledge of the Zalari, the genetic mastery of the Yilath, the interdimensional technologies of the Vaeltari? Michael Carter didn't flinch. He had expected this. He had prepared for it. He pulled up another projection. This time it wasn't war records. It wasn't maps of human colonies. It was human invention. You claim we have contributed nothing. But in our short existence, we have done what your ancient empires have long abandoned. The holograms flickered, shifting from one breakthrough to the next. Nanotechnology capable of repairing a dying sun, cybernetic enhancements that allowed the paralyzed to walk again, artificial intelligence that rivaled the computational power of entire planetary networks, medical advancements that had eradicated diseases that once plagued the stars. You stopped pushing the boundaries of possibility because you had time to wait. We never had that luxury. We had to fight for every inch of progress. And because of that, we do what you deem impossible. The chamber murmured in uneasy whispers. The weight of their own stagnation was now undeniable. The Zalari ambassador's crystalline form pulsed erratically, as if disturbed. You evolved too fast, it admitted. That is unnatural. Dangerous. You are an anomaly. Michael chuckled, stepping forward. His next words sent a shiver through the council. We are not an anomaly. We are inevitable. The council had seen countless species before, but none like humanity. None that learned so quickly, none that adapted so fiercely, none that refused to die. And now, as they sat in stunned silence, they realized the truth. Humanity had arrived. And they were never leaving. The murmurs in the chamber grew louder, shifting from disbelief to something else. Concern. Fear. Even the most arrogant among the council members couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Humanity's rise wasn't a fluke. It wasn't luck. It was a force of nature. The Darathi delegate coiled his long, sinewy body, his tail thumping against the marble floor in irritation. He still wasn't ready to accept this. You expect us to believe that your kind will continue this reckless growth? That your fire will never burn out? That you will not, like so many before you, reach a peak and then crumble into dust? Michael Carter held his gaze steady. There was no anger in his expression, no arrogance, just cold certainty. That's the difference between us and those who came before, he said. They built civilizations to last forever. They thought time was on their side. They grew complacent. But we? His smile was almost predatory. We don't expect eternity. We expect struggle, and we embrace it. The chamber fell silent once more. For the first time, these ancient races were forced to see themselves through different eyes. They had ruled the stars for so long, had watched species rise and fall so many times, that they had never imagined encountering something like this, something that didn't fear time, that thrived on adversity. The Zalari ambassador's crystalline form pulsed with a deep, resonant hum. And what is it you seek, human? If not dominion, then what? Michael's smile faded, replaced with something far more dangerous: determination. We seek what we have always sought: to go further, to be better, to survive. He let the words settle before adding, "We didn't come here for permission. We came here to warn you." The chamber held its breath. Because if we've come this far in just a few thousand years, you should be asking yourselves one thing. Michael leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried through the vast chamber. What happens when we're no longer the young ones? The council members had no answer. For the first time in countless millennia, the ancient races of the galaxy had encountered a species that wasn't bound by the same rules, a species that didn't fear time, that didn't submit to stagnation, a species that would never stop. And for the first time, they realized humanity was not a joke, humanity was a warning. The chamber remained silent, the weight of Michael Carter's words settling over the gathered representatives like a suffocating shroud. These were beings who had lived through the rise and fall of empires, who had shaped the stars themselves. And yet, for the first time in countless millennia, they felt something unfamiliar. Dread. The Darathi delegate, always the first to sneer, now looked more cautious than arrogant. He flicked his forked tongue, his bioluminescent scales dimming slightly. "And if we decide," he said slowly, measuring his words carefully, "that your species is a threat to the balance of the galaxy?" Michael didn't blink. "Then I would remind you that countless others have thought the same about us." He took a step forward, locking eyes with the reptilian diplomat. "They're not here anymore." The unspoken meaning sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. Humanity had not been the dominant species on Earth when they first emerged. They had not been the strongest nor the fastest, but they had become the apex predators of their world, not through brute strength, but through sheer adaptability and persistence. Now they stood before the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, and they were delivering a message. "We are not here to conquer," Michael continued, his voice steady. "We are not here to submit. We are here to evolve. If you stand beside us, we will share the stars. If you stand in our way—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. The Ralzek ambassador, the towering insectoid with his gleaming carapace, clacked his mandibles. "You threaten war?" Michael shook his head. Number war is for those who seek destruction. We do not seek destruction. The holographic display behind him shifted again. This time it showed something far more terrifying than humanity's past wars. It showed projections, models of human progress, their exponential growth in technology, population, and influence. It showed a future where humanity wasn't competing with the elder species. It showed a future where humanity had surpassed them. The implications were clear. The Council could resist them. They could try to suppress them. But it wouldn't change the outcome. It would only delay the inevitable. The Zalari ambassador's crystalline form pulsed erratically, its energy fluctuating with uncertainty. "You are dangerous," it murmured, almost to itself. "Not because of violence, but because you cannot be stopped." Michael simply nodded. "You finally understand." The chamber fell into an uneasy silence once more. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council had been the ultimate authority in the known universe. They had seen civilizations come and go, had dictated the fate of entire species, and now they were being forced to recognize a new reality. Humanity wasn't here to ask for acceptance. They weren't seeking approval. They were here to claim their place, and no one, not the Darathi, not the Zalari, not any of the ancient empires, could do a damn thing to stop them. The chamber remained heavy with tension, the realization dawning upon the gathered council like the slow death of a star. For the first time in millennia, they were no longer the undisputed masters of the cosmos. The Darathi delegate, who moments ago had mocked humanity, now looked uncertain. His glowing eyes darted across the room, searching for support from the other ambassadors. But none spoke. None dared. The silence was worse than any outburst. Michael Carter stood firm, his expression unwavering. He had said what needed to be said. Now it was time to see how these so-called wise and ancient beings would react. It was the Zalari ambassador who finally broke the silence. "You are unlike any species we have encountered before," it admitted, its crystalline shell vibrating with unreadable energy. "Your kind should not have reached this point so soon. You should not be standing here." Michael smiled, but there was no warmth in it. And yet, here we are. The insectoid Ralzek ambassador shifted uncomfortably, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "What do you want from us, human? You say you do not seek war. You claim you do not seek conquest. Then why have you come?" Michael took a deep breath. "To tell you that the galaxy is changing," he said simply. "You've lived in comfort for too long. You thought time was on your side. You thought no new power could rise and challenge you. That era is over." He let his words settle before continuing. "We will not ask for permission to exist. We will not bow to decrees made by civilizations that have long since lost the fire to evolve. We do not seek to rule you, but we will not be ruled." The Darathi's scales flared in irritation. "So you seek independence?" Michael shook his head. "We seek progress. Whether you stand with us or against us is irrelevant. We are moving forward, regardless." The council chambers had witnessed countless negotiations, treaties, and diplomatic talks over the centuries. But never had they witnessed this. A species standing before them, declaring itself not as a subject, not as a threat, but as the next chapter of history itself. And the worst part? They knew it was true. The Darathi delegate coiled his long body, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Then I suppose we have no choice but to adapt as well." Michael nodded. "That would be wise." The meeting adjourned soon after, but the echoes of it would ripple across the galaxy for generations to come. For the first time in untold millennia, the great and ancient races of the cosmos had been forced to look at themselves and acknowledge the bitter truth. They were no longer the future. Humanity was, and nothing would ever be the same again. The aftermath of the meeting reverberated across the galaxy, with a force none of the ancient races could ignore. The Galactic Council, once the ultimate authority in the universe, was now left to grapple with the weight of what had just transpired. The human delegation returned to their vessel, the Sovereign, leaving the council chambers in the midst of a storm of whispered conversations, debates, and desperate reassessments of the future. The council had not yet made its official decision, but the quiet was deafening. The representatives of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy couldn't escape the reality that humanity had, in the span of mere decades, become a force to be reckoned with. Inside the Sovereign's command deck, Michael Carter stood by a large viewing window, staring out into the vast expanse of stars. His mind was calm, but his thoughts were anything but. The momentary silence of the meeting was deceptive. He knew the Council would not simply accept humanity's rise with open arms. They would resist. They had to. It was the only way they knew how to deal with threats. But that resistance would come at a cost, and Michael was prepared for it. The ship's communications officer, Lieutenant Isla Reynolds, approached with a fresh report. "Sir, we've just received a message from the Veltari Senate. They want a private meeting." Michael's eyes narrowed. The Veltari were known for their interdimensional knowledge, their mastery of space-time manipulation. They were not a species easily swayed by emotion or rhetoric, and their reputation for diplomacy was almost as legendary as their technology. "Set up the meeting, but remember, this is not a negotiation. We're not asking for permission," he replied, his voice steady but resolute. Isla gave a nod, but her expression was wary. "Understood, sir, but we may be walking into a hornet's nest." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Michael muttered. As the meeting time approached, the human delegation prepared for another round of diplomatic chess, aware that this would be the real test. The Veltari had always maintained a neutral stance, but their influence was vast, and their power could tip the scales of any conflict. As the shuttle carrying the human delegates neared the Veltari capital ship, Michael stood once again at the front, gazing at the massive ship floating like a phantom in the darkness of space. Its sleek, almost ethereal design looked like it was made of pure energy, its surface shifting and undulating as if it existed outside of normal space. "This will be different," he said softly, his thoughts far ahead of the moment. "But we must be ready for it." The shuttle docked, and Michael, along with his team, stepped into the Veltari's grand hall. It was a place of quiet elegance, with walls that shimmered like liquid crystal, constantly shifting colors as if the very structure of the room was alive. At the center stood a massive table, and seated around it were the Veltari council members. The first thing Michael noticed was their eyes. They weren't like any eyes he had ever seen before. Their irises were multifaceted, shifting like prisms, reflecting and refracting the light in strange, almost hypnotic ways. The Veltari had the ability to perceive time differently from most other species, which gave them a unique perspective on the universe. The lead ambassador, a being whose body seemed to flicker in and out of phase, spoke in a voice that echoed with strange harmonics. "Humanity," it began, "you have caused a great disturbance. The balance of the galaxy has been—" "Disrupted?" Michael interjected, his voice sharp. "No, Veltari, it has been changed, and you will either adapt or you will be left behind." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, it felt like the entire universe was holding its breath. The Veltari ambassador's form shimmered, its multifaceted eyes flickering as if considering something far beyond the present moment. "You presume much for a species that has only just reached the threshold of the stars," it said slowly. "But perhaps you are right. Perhaps this galaxy, this universe, is not for the old anymore. You humans, you have something the rest of us have lost. Fire. Michael stood tall. And that fire will burn brighter than anything you have ever known. There was no more talk of submission or conquest. This wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about evolution. "What do you want, human?" the Vialtari ambassador asked, the weight of the question palpable. Michael met their gaze, steady as ever. "We want the future, and we're taking it, with or without your help." The response was silence. Then, slowly, the Vialtari ambassador nodded, its form shimmering like a star fading into the dawn. "You may just have what it takes to shape it." The meeting ended soon after, but the ramifications of it would echo through the galaxy for centuries to come. The Vialtari, like all the others, had seen the truth. Humanity wasn't just a new force in the galaxy. They were the force that would redefine the galaxy, and they would no longer be ignored. The moment Michael and his team stepped back onto the Sovereign, the reality of what had just transpired weighed heavily in the air. The Vialtari, the most enigmatic and detached of the elder races, had acknowledged them, not as a curiosity, not as an upstart species, but as an equal. That, in itself, was a victory. But it wasn't over. Not yet. As the ship's airlock sealed behind them, Isla Reynolds was already moving to her console, her face tense. "Sir, we've intercepted a transmission from the Darathi homeworld. It's encrypted, but from the message structure it looks like military orders." Michael exhaled slowly. "Let me guess. Fleet mobilization?" She nodded grimly. "Looks that way. The Darathi aren't going to sit back and watch us rise. They're preparing for something." The other officers exchanged uneasy glances. No one was surprised. If any species was going to react with hostility, it would be the Darathi. They were an empire built on dominance, on subjugation. They saw power as something to be enforced, not earned, and humanity had just shattered their illusion of superiority in front of the entire Galactic Council. "Pull up the details," Michael ordered, stepping toward the main holotable. Within seconds, a galactic map flickered into view, and bright red markers began appearing near Darathi-controlled systems. The numbers were concerning: fleet formations, troop deployments, supply lines shifting. The Darathi weren't just posturing, they were planning something real. "They're moving faster than expected," Isla muttered. "They don't want to give us time to prepare." Michael's jaw tightened. "Then we take that time ourselves?" He turned to Admiral Kovac, the Sovereign's commanding officer. The man was a veteran of Earth's last interstellar conflicts, a seasoned strategist who had fought and won against overwhelming odds before. "Admiral, we need to send word to all human colonies. Lock down supply routes, reinforce defensive positions, and initiate silent fleet movements. We don't make the first move, but we sure as hell don't let them catch us off guard." Kovac nodded, already sending out commands to the fleet. "And what about the Council?" Isla asked. "Some of them might intervene. The Vialtari seemed open to us, but the Ralzek and Zalari might be pressured into siding with the Darathi." Michael clenched his fists. "Then we show them exactly what happens when you push humanity into a corner." The room fell silent. Every officer present knew what that meant. Humanity had never been the first to strike, but they had never lost a war when forced to fight. And if the Darathi wanted to see what a young, hungry civilization could do when threatened, then so be it. Michael took one last look at the galactic map, at the shifting red markers that signaled the coming storm. Then he turned to his people, his voice steady. "This is what we were built for. This is why we survive. They laughed at us once. They won't be laughing for long." And as the Sovereign powered up its engines, preparing to take its place at the front lines of history, one thing became clear. The galaxy had just made its biggest mistake. It had underestimated humanity. The war began in whispers. The Darathi never made an official declaration. They didn't need to. Their fleets simply moved, first toward border colonies, then into the neutral zones, and finally toward human-occupied systems. Their military doctrine was simple: crush the enemy before they can fight back. It had worked for them for thousands of years, but they had never fought humanity. Michael Carter stood in the command center of the Sovereign, his eyes locked on the tactical display. Red markers, Darathi warships, pushed deeper into human space. But the blue markers, human fleets, weren't retreating. They were waiting. Admiral Kovacs leaned over the table, his face grim but focused. They think we'll react like every other species they've conquered, that we'll fall back, negotiate, beg. Michael smirked. Then let's teach them how wrong they are. The first engagement happened near Proxima Outpost, a small but strategically vital station guarding the inner colonies. The Darathi sent 3 battle cruisers, expecting an easy victory. They found nothing but empty space. Confused, they pushed forward, only for the human fleet to ambush them from the asteroid belt, a maneuver the Council races would have considered reckless. To humanity, it was standard tactics. The Darathi lost all 3 cruisers in under 15 minutes. It was only the beginning. The War of Misdirection. Humanity didn't fight like the ancient empires. They didn't line up in neat formations. They didn't rely on slow-moving dreadnoughts, and they sure as hell didn't throw wave after wave of troops at the enemy. They fought like they had always fought, with deception, adaptability, and overwhelming force at the right moment. Darathi convoys started vanishing in deep space. Their supply lines were disrupted by human stealth ships. Every time they thought they had cornered a human fleet, they were the ones walking into a trap. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as humanity, the young and inexperienced species, systematically dismantled one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. And then, something happened that changed everything. The turning point, the Battle of Orion Gate. The Darathi, desperate to regain control, launched a full-scale assault on Orion Gate, a massive relay station that linked human space to the wider galaxy. They sent an entire armada, 300 ships, enough to wipe out entire fleets. Michael Carter and Admiral Kovacs had 37. The Council watched the battle unfold in real time, convinced this would be humanity's breaking point. But they didn't understand how humans fought. They didn't understand that war, to humans, was an art. Instead of facing the Darathi head-on, the human fleet shut down all communications and powered down their ships. The Darathi approached, assuming the station had already been abandoned. That was their mistake. As soon as the Darathi armada moved into range, hidden orbital mines, planted weeks in advance, detonated across their fleet. Dozens of ships were instantly destroyed, while others were thrown into chaos. Then, humanity struck. From the dark void of space, the Sovereign and its fleet powered up in unison, launching an onslaught of coordinated missile strikes, electronic warfare, and precision assaults. The Darathi never recovered. By the time the battle was over, 250 Darathi ships were destroyed. The remaining survivors surrendered, something their species had never done before. The Council received a simple message from Michael Carter after the battle. You called us young. You called us reckless. You laughed at us. You shouldn't have. The war was no longer just a conflict. It was a reckoning. The beginning of the end. Across the galaxy, the news spread. Humanity had not only survived the Darathi onslaught, they had turned the tide. And the other ancient races? They were terrified. Because now they had to ask themselves a single, horrifying question. If humanity could do this in their infancy, what would they become in their prime? In the aftermath of Orion Gate, the Galactic Council convened in emergency session. The balance of power in the universe had shifted, and for the first time, humanity was at the center of it. The Durathi, humiliated and desperate, demanded immediate retaliation. Their ambassador's voice trembled with rage. "We must act now. If humanity is left unchecked, they will consume this galaxy. They do not know their place." But the Vaeltari, ever the observers, responded with something that sent a cold chill through the chamber. "Perhaps it is we who do not know theirs," their ambassador said, their voice echoing through the halls. The council erupted in argument. Some wanted war, some wanted to surrender. But one truth was now undeniable. Humanity wasn't just another species. They were something else, something new. Back in human space, Michael Carter knew the war wasn't over. The Durathi would never accept peace, and the rest of the council was still deciding what to do. He wouldn't give them the chance. "We end this now," he told Admiral Kovacs. "No more waiting for them to make the next move. We take the fight to them." And so, humanity did what no other species had dared to do before. They invaded an ancient empire. The Durathi homeworld, once thought untouchable, saw human warships descend from the void like predators closing in for the kill. They bypassed the Durathi's planetary defenses, not with brute force, but with ingenuity. Cyber warfare shut down their systems. Infiltration teams sabotaged their command centers. By the time the Durathi realized what was happening, it was already over. Their emperor was forced to kneel before a human delegation and sign an unconditional surrender. Humanity had done the impossible. They had defeated an elder race. When word of the Durathi's fall reached the council, the reaction was immediate. The Zalari, the Ralzek, even the once neutral Vaeltari, they all understood. The galaxy would never be the same. Some races chose to ally with humanity, recognizing that resistance was futile. Others withdrew, hoping to avoid conflict altogether. And some, the foolish ones, began plotting in secret, hoping to one day reclaim what they had lost. But one thing was clear: humanity had arrived, and no one was laughing anymore. Years later, long after the war had ended, a new species petitioned to join the Galactic Council. They were young, much like humanity had once been. They were greeted with skepticism, with laughter, with arrogance. But then, an old recording was played before the council, Michael Carter's final words from the Orion Gate battle. "You called us young, you called us reckless, you laughed at us, you shouldn't have." Silence followed. Because now the ancient races understood. They had once mocked humanity, and they had paid the price. The cycle would not repeat. Not again. Because the galaxy had learned its lesson. Never underestimate the humans. Never again.